Hello guys, welcome to the UQCS React workshop, our first workshop for the semester. So, guess we'll get started. Firstly, we've got some links here. So we have our React repository and our Zoom link. So our repository is going to contain our projects for this session, and it's going to contain the slides that you're seeing right up now. And the Zoom link, Kenton is going to be on that the entire time. So you guys can just go ahead and join that, ask your questions all over that, and we'll also go into some group exercises later, and hopefully we'll all have a great time.
Yeah, so make sure you do join the Zoom link. I'll be working through what Paul's presenting, so you can follow along and make sure you're doing the right thing there. And you can see my code as well.
Sweet. So if you haven't installed React already, just follow these instructions here. We made a post on our Facebook, so if you need to go over there and check that out, you can just take your time over there. If you have any more questions, just head on over to our Zoom, and I'm sure Kenton can help you out with installing React. Yeah, and I think with that, we can just get started.
Paul, you may want to mute your Zoom.
Yep. Sorry about that. I'll just mute myself here. All right.
Yep.
So, React works with JSX, which is a form of markup used in React. Basically, it allows you to write JavaScript in HTML, and it combines it all together, so it's just easy for you to use in general. So, for example, before we installed Create React App. Create React App does all these conversions for you. In this first example up here, we're obviously having a little bit of JavaScript up here, or JSX, right in the Style tab here. Actually, this part here is actually converted after Babel, which is a part of the Create React App, and it's created into this. And this is what React actually reads, but luckily for us, we don't have to worry about any of that. All we have to worry about is doing this part, which is a lot easier. Alright, so components. Components are pretty much custom HTML elements written in React. They let you split up your UI into loads of reusable pieces, and they involve JavaScript, HTML, CSS. There pretty much exist two types of components. There exist functional components and there exist class components. But for the purposes of this workshop, we'll just be focusing on the functional components. And that's mostly because React is moving in more so of a functional direction. But you're more than welcome to go and look into class components. And of course, with components, how they work is components have a render function. And the render function obviously tells your site how that singular component renders. But we'll get into that in a second. So, what's in a tweet? On the screen right now, we have a tweet from Volkswagen USA, right? The 21st century VW Beetle was just revealed. Check out the revolutionary new take on the iconic design. Now, looking at this tweet here, there are loads of different types of components involved. And actually, this entire tweet is one component in itself. So, the first part here, the author component, if you will, has a title, the author, we have the handle, and we have a profile picture here, right? This is pretty much a singular component which belongs to the tweet component. Then we might have another component down here which contains all the buttons, right? And we have more components such as statistics here, retweets, favorites, date and time posted, right? The thing with React is components make it so much easier to modularize your entire code. That's what makes React so popular. When we think about components in the large, they don't have to be just on a small scale tweet. If you look at it on a website scale, the navigation bar itself is one component. The feed, your profile dashboard are all components, right? And in general, on large websites such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they all are comprised of so many components. In React, this is how we code functional components. So we start off with a regular function like you would in JavaScript, right? We have a return function here, and then we have our HTML. Now for people coming into React for the first time, or just kind of starting off with JavaScript, this would look really weird because normally you wouldn't be allowed to put HTML and JavaScript together like you're seeing there. But the thing with JSX, like we talked about earlier, is that it allows you to do this. But pretty much the only condition that has to be kind of met here is that anything you put in here has to be surrounded in a larger tag. So in this small little app we have here, this will just be returning hello to our web page. If we think about a tweet component, we have all this area here, right? However, the tweet title, the handle, and the content message wouldn't work if they weren't surrounded by this div area here. I'm not too sure if you want to go and make a little example and just kind of show that not working. I can show you the screen in a second.
Yeah.
But it's really important that all your content is surrounded by tags. And actually, a good thing to also bring up here is that they don't have to be div tags, or they don't have to be conventional HTML tags. They can just be literally, is that your screen that I'm seeing?
I need to go create React app and set it up.
Okay, sweet. But you don't even need the div tag in there. All you need is literally the first arrow and the right arrow, and that there is enough. So moving on, what are props, or as some of you might know them, properties? And props are used to pass data through to your components. If you think about other languages, right, like Python or JavaScript, think of these like read-only function parameters, right? And so, like any other language, there are a couple of rules involved in this as well. So, when your components use props, you need to pass it as an argument into the function. And we'll look at that in a second. So, this little image here is how we define a component in React. And this here is how we define our function parameter, the prop, what goes in to that function. So, coding time. So this is where we're going to be doing our first exercise. If you want to go ahead and see what the final product can look like, you can head back to our repository, which is at this link here, so the first link, /react. And if you go to that first repository to the first exercise, you'll see the full product. But for the moment, I will get up this. So, to get things started, I will set up a new directory. So I've got on my desktop here a new folder, React Workshop. So I'm going to go and cd into that. Do that, I'll just go here. Alright, so now I'm in my React Workshop folder. I can go and create my React app. So I'll go npx, create React app, and I'm going to name it. So I'm going to name it Workshop. Right, and this part here will take a little bit. It also depends on if you've done this before. So if you've created your own React app before, then this might take a little bit of a shorter time period. But if this is your first time, it might be a little bit longer. So while that all loads up, you still
going?
going?
Take a while.
It does take a while. Yeah.
Can you make your font a bit bigger?
Yeah, definitely. Let me just
I can do that.
on the terminal or
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So do you want me to swap to your screen?
Yeah, it's still loading. It's just create React app, taking its time.
Yeah, it is. Well,
It's nice and messy.
alright, I can swap to your screen. So if you're currently creating your React app, it should look something like this, and it should be taking its sweet time. Yeah.
It does.
For the moment though, there's not much we can do while we wait, but I guess what we can do is, this is the repository here, if you haven't seen it already. So this is the first exercise that we'll be doing right now. This is the completed version. The second exercise is what we're doing after Kenton covers the next part of the content. These are the workshop slides, so all the slides that you see here. So if you want to go back over them, you can download those slides, go through them. And, yes, the app.css. So this part here, since we're going to be doing these exercises, we've already gone ahead and created the CSS file for you. So when your React app loads, like it's worked with my screen, so I'll go npm start, and actually before I do that, let me show you. I'll go to my desktop, React Workshop, and now it's created a folder here for me. So I'll click to Workshop, and we have everything here, right? And you're wondering where your code is, where you're going to be editing stuff, right? So we're going to come to our source folder for that. And this is pretty much everything you'll be dealing with. So we can come here, npm start. We'll probably should cd into the folder. Yep, so cd into my workshop folder. And now that I'm here, I can do ls, and I have all my folders here. I can go npm start. And now my React scripts are starting up. And just like in the instructions that we put out when you're setting up React, you should get a tab as so with the name localhost port 3000. So to begin, we're going to be editing the app.js file. So come to your IDE and open up and just navigate over to your workshop file and come to the app.js, right? And just wondering, is that font size okay? Is that good?
Yeah.
Bit bigger? Yep, okay. How do I set up the font size again?
You should just press Ctrl+, will work.
Oh, there it is. Good. Okay, sweet. So this is pretty much our current React app, which is this. So I'm going to go and get rid of the stuff we don't need. So we don't really need anything inside this header area, right? So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And I'm also going to go ahead and remove this logo.sgv, because that was pretty much the React spinning logo. So now if you've gone and saved that and you've head back to your browser, you might realize that suddenly all this is blank, right? So now we're starting off on a clean slate. Right, now that we're here, we're going to create our React application. So, like I mentioned earlier here, we have our div tags, right? So everything we make pretty much has to be inside of these tags, right? So, to begin with, we're going to create a tweet, like I showed you before. So, if we come back to these slides, here we go. So, what's in a tweet here? So we have this author area, we have the tweet content, And let's just say for this exercise here, let's work with these retweets and these favorites, right? So for the moment, let's create a separate area, right, for our tweet. Now, one thing that you guys might have noticed if you're adept with HTML is this right here, class name, right? Normally in HTML, we would write things like this, class equals app. In JSX though, there are some minor differences in how we write things, right? So this is one of them. So instead of class, we write class name. And over here, since we're dealing with a tweet, we can go class name equals tweet. And with this area here, if you download the app.css file and replace it in your own folder, then our CSS will handle how your tweet looks like. So now that we have this area here, we're going to go and create our little author area. So what did I name this? So I named this the author info area. So I'm going to create another div. Are you good to go? Or... No. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so our author info area here. Firstly, we have our our Volkswagen USA and @VW. So let's call this for the moment our author name and our author handle, right? So I can create maybe 2 list items for the moment, our author name and author title. And coming over here, and we have this already here, right? So you might have noticed that you come here, right? You don't have to refresh, right? As long as you save, this will automatically refresh for you. And while I'm here, I'll also head over here, and actually, I already have this downloaded. Where is it? React. Source app.css. So I'll come over here, go to my workshop, and I'll paste it in here and replace it. And if I come over here, this should look a little bit more like a tweet, although there's still a little bit of work to do, right? So now that we have this area here, our author info, we can create the content, right? So this is our tweet content, right? Saving that, coming over here, and that works there. Now we wanted the likes and the favorites part. And nope, still going. Okay, so for this part here, we can do, what were the classes here? So we can do, for the author name, to use the CSS, we can do ID equals author, and ID here equals handle. And if that all works out, that should give us a little bit more like what we're looking for here. Right? Okay, so moving on to our next part here, our stats. So our stats part looks like that. So we can create a div, class name equals stats, and we can go likes equals, let's say for the moment, 10, and favorites, 10. Right? And this right now is how our tweet is looking right. But at the moment, you're probably thinking to yourself, hey, this doesn't really look like a tweet just yet, or this doesn't really look like a lot like React or a lot like the components we just looked at, right? So we're going to turn all of this now into our components, like we just mentioned. So if we now go and create a new file, and we can save this as, for example, tweet.js, right? This is now my workshop folder in that same folder as app.js. I can go import React from React : right? And now I'm going to create a functional component. So I can go function, tweet, just like before, and return, and create a div statement. So we're going to have our tweet in here. Now, if we head back to our app, we can see that this is all within our tweet. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this area here, and get rid of that, and put it into here. Make sure that's indented properly as well. Okay, so now that that's all sorted out, if we look back to our page, it's gone again. So to use our components, like earlier, we're going to have to reference them. But first, we're going to have to export this component. So to do that, come down to the very bottom of your new tweet.js and do export default tweet and : and now this is a finished component for the most part. Now, to use this component, all you have to do now is import it, and then reference it. So import tweet.js : and we can come over here and do tweet, right? And that is how we reference a component in React. Oh, tweet is not defined. App.js. So, of course, okay. So, import tweet from tweet.js, my bad. And then suddenly we have this. And if we want to create as many tweets as we like, they will all be pasted here. So these are components, right? Any questions yet on through Zoom? Nope. Okay, sweet. So now we want to think about, hey, so all these are pretty generic right now. How do we customize them? So now that we want to customize them, we have to think about props, like we mentioned earlier. So to put props, think about the parameters in a function, right? So props here, right? And let's say here we want to define this as props.name, right? Oh, my bad. Let me cover this first. So whenever we want to use now JavaScript in this HTML area, you're going to have to use one of these curly braces. And anything that you do within these curly braces is now JSX. So from here we can do props.name, and over here we can include a props.handle, and in here we can do a props.content, and we'll come back to likes and favorites later when we cover something else. So we have our name, handle, and content, right? Now, if we head back to the app.js, to now reference those props, we have to include names for them. So, coming back to here, the first one was name, right? So if I want to do that, I can go name equals, and let's say I want to name it Volkswagen, if I spelled that correctly. I hope so. Volkswagen. Then if I come back over here, this first one is Volkswagen. And as you might have noticed, almost everything else apart from Volkswagen is gone. That's because everything else needs a prop in order to render. but without a prop, it's not going to be there. So if I want to come over here and create some more names, I can go Volkswagen, I can go Apple, I can go UQ Computing, and all these names will show up here. I can then also go handle at VW, just like in that tweet, and the VW handle will come up here. If you guys want to continue with these, you're more than welcome. I'll just finish off the content here. So that was props.content here. So content, and let's say, please buy our new best car. And suddenly you have yourself a tweet. And you can go through here and customize these yourself. It's up to you really. Alright, and with the props and components done, I think it's time for the next part, state. And Kenton's on that.
Yep. Do you want me to present it? I've got this pretty much set up as we were up to.
For state? Okay,
Yep.
Sweet.
Okay, go ahead. Can I stand?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the state? Paul did a great job earlier explaining what properties are of the components. They're just like function arguments. They get passed in from outside. But what if there's something inside the component which shouldn't come from outside? It should just have internally. Like we saw, a tweet should keep track of its own likes and favorites, for example. How do we handle that? So the state is able to control how a component renders. And it can render different HTML based on this state. Each component has a state, and that only belongs to that particular component, or child components, as we'll see later. And whenever this state changes, the component will automatically re-render to make the necessary changes to the HTML, so your UI is always up to date without you even worrying about it, which is one of the great things about React. So to define a state, how do we define state? Defining and updating the state in a functional component is actually pretty simple. So if you would like to do it, all you need to do is go const square bracket variable comma set var equals useState initial value, and you can put that above the return line where you added your JSX elements. And the key point to note with this state is you always use the function set variable here to change the state, and you can never change it directly, otherwise React doesn't know that your state has updated, and then it won't know to re-render the view. So if you change it using the setter, it knows that whenever the state changes, the component will automatically re-render to make the necessary changes. Can I scroll over to that?
Sure.
How do I do that?
Like that? Yeah, just over there.
Cool. Yeah, as you can see here, Paul's made the changes like that. So you can go const tweets and set tweets, so the number of tweets equals useState 0. Can you make the font bigger? Just press Control plus.
Sure.
Control plus, mash that a couple of times, and we'll be good. Alrighty, so useState, the number of tweets starts at 0, and it has a setter here, set tweets, as well as the current value of tweets in the variable here. And what we can do is replace the number, which you may have had here, with likes, and you replace that with
tweets here, should be likes.
Oh yeah, likes.
Change this for
Oh, you will also need to add useState to your React import at the top there. And then it's very easy to just use likes like a normal variable. And if you re-render that and go to Chrome, yeah, it's already open in Chrome.
Yep, that's my bad.
What has happened there?
You've used a different one than I do.
Just get rid of the star as. I think that'll do it. Yeah.
Yep, okay, save that.
And that should work. It'll run. Yep. And as you can see, it was very easy to just add this 0 likes, and we now show 0 likes across all of our tweets there. But it's important to know that each tweet is actually keeping track of its own state. So even though they're all the same right now, if we were to change this likes by using the setter, it would only affect the individual tweet which it was attached to. So that's the key part of state. What's next? Yeah, and here, as we saw, is an example of a stateful component. Are we able to add an example of changing the likes?
Sure. I'll do something real quick.
Okay. And what we can do now is we can add a button, which will change the number of likes. And the way we do that is the button onClick. onClick is just a prop. And it has a function defined using this arrow notation here. And it goes set presses to the number of presses plus 1. But in our tweet example, that will be something like this, which looks like that. So there will be a button, and when you click the button, it sets the likes to the number of likes plus 1. So 1 extra like. I think you need some text inside the button. Yeah, that would be good to make it show up as 1 like. Yeah, and you can see there, it's incrementing the likes of that first tweet, but the other tweets have their own separate state. And you can change separately, individually from each other. Okay. Cool. Okay, so what if we want a child component to change the state of its parent? As an example here, we might start thinking that earlier in our tweet example, your tweet was made up of things like the author info, the body, and the buttons at the bottom. What if we wanted to pull these buttons out into a separate component? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we could do that. We could do that in much the same way as we made our tweets component. You can just go make a new file, call it buttons or whatever you like. Buttons.js. Yep. Thank you. And in a similar process, you import React from React. And then you should be able to do function, because we're working with function components again. Function buttons, and return.
Yep.
Return.
Great.
And return. And then we'll just grab our JSX code from before and paste it into buttons. And hopefully you can see that through this pattern of refactoring out commonly used parts of components, this shows you how easy it is to use React to make modular code. Export default buttons. But because it uses likes in here, we'll also need to grab the line which says use state and move it to our buttons component. But maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. So, what if the buttons itself shouldn't keep track of its own number of likes? Because that should logically be part of the tweet. So the tweet should have that state. Then how can the buttons also get access to the number of likes? And how can the buttons change the number of likes? Well, the way we can do that is by passing it as a component prop to the buttons. And we can also pass the setter as another prop. So if you look here, what we're doing here is just defining a buttons element, and we'll add a property which is called like count. And then we can pass in likes from our use state up top, and that should show up.
Yep, let me just go and define that here.
Yeah, and we'll need to change likes there to use props.likeCount because it's passed in. Do you want to get that compiling first?
Yep, set likes is not defined in buttons.
Oh yeah, you'll need to get rid of that. Just get rid of that first, and we'll show this working. Okay. And then, yeah, so we have our old one at the top there, and we have our new one at the bottom as well. But it should be easy enough to get rid of that, save it again, and it will be back up and running in a second, literally. And we can see here our likes is 0, which is passed in from the tweet component. Okay, but we want to change the number of likes as well in our buttons. Well, we can just pass set likes as a prop. So we'll have a property called change likes, and we can pass set likes like that. And then in our buttons, we can just use it like a normal variable or a normal function. And it will be props.change.
Likes.
Yep.
Change likes.
Oh, but we will also need to wrap that in a function like this, a callback function, so to speak, so that it knows to increment it by 1.
Yep.
So back in our tweet component, we will actually make a callback function which will set likes to likes plus 1. Then, oh yeah, close your buttons, and there needs to be some text in there. Yeah, there we go. And if we click add, you can see that it's propagating through, but what it's actually doing now is when we click add 1 in the buttons component, it calls the set likes function in the parent, and the parent re-renders everything as it needs to. So the state is still part of the parent component. It's kind of just being borrowed by the buttons component. Yeah, and this is very powerful because it lets you pass state as deep as you need to as many components which need it. They can have that state just through a simple use of properties. Yeah, and this example here is another example very similar to our tweet one.
Alrighty.
Cool. So what is
Time
this?
your coding. Sweet. So now we'll work on the second exercise, which is pretty much upgrading our first mini tweet program and including stuff which Kenton talked about, which was state and updating stuff. So we're thinking likes and favorites. So coming back to our React app here, this is my current version. You could have gone ahead and made it all cool. That's great as well. So let's come over to your tweet.js. So to get started, we want to go and import our sort of usage for the state. So just come in here, import React, comma, and inside here do use state, right? This will allow you now to create state variables. So once you have that, you can come inside here in this function and you can start writing them. So first of all, create this constant here, and we can go likes and set likes, and then we use the state, and all likes start off at an initial value at 0. So the initial value for this, 0, right? And then the same thing here with favorites. So coming here, set favorites equals use state 0, right? Now that we have all this sorted out, it's time to change our likes and favorites from this random text. So come in here and we'll use our JSX. So if you don't remember how to use that, that's just a curly bracket in here and put likes, right? And the second you use likes here, if you're using VS Code, this will also light up here, meaning that you're now using that variable. So I'll do the same for favorites, right? And like we did in the first exercise, now all these should be 0, right? Now we want to go and do the same as before. So create those buttons and our likes and favorites. So we can come over to so creating a new file, and we can call it buttons.js, just like earlier. And we can go do the same thing here, import React from React, and function, we can call it buttons here. Have our return statement, so what this component here will be returning. And now that this is done, we can come over to our tweak.js here and grab our stats. So now that we have this area here, we can come here and plate this up nicely. Okay, we have them here. Obviously likes and favorites haven't been defined yet, so we're going to have to import them through the props. So we can do props.likes and props.favorites for the moment. And now we also want to go and create a like and favorite button. Now, unlike what we just did, on Twitter you can't just go and constantly press the like button and expect the like count just to go straight up, right? So we're going to create something involving state variables where you can only like that tweet once or favorite that tweet once. So to do that, we're going to go and create firstly we're going to go import these buttons. So import buttons from buttons.js, right? And I can go over here and just buttons, right? Come over here. Does not contain a default X, of course. I forgot to export default button. So export, oh, sorry. So exporting our component so we can use it. Right, coming over here, and we have our buttons, but the likes and favorites aren't there yet. That's because we haven't put the props through the components. So, coming back to our tweet, and we can go likes equals our likes, and our favorites equal our favorites. Right, and we see this, and now they all appear here. So, now that we have this, we want to find a way for it to change. So, over here, these are our tweet-specific state variables, right? But we want our user-specific state variables. And these variables are going to tell us if the user has personally liked or favorited those tweets. So, we're going to come here and create a new state variable. So, we can call it has liked, set has liked, and use state for the moment can be false. And then over here we can go has favorited, and set has favorited, and use state false. Right? And this will pretty much handle everything involving the user. So, now that we have this, we are going to create our actual buttons in the JavaScript file. So, we have this area here. I'm going to go and create some buttons here. So we have our first button, which can be like, and we have our second button, which can be favorite. Now, I mentioned something earlier, which was about class names, and how you can't do this in JSX. You have to always use class name. There's a similar thing here, actually, in JSX. Normally in JavaScript and HTML, you can do on click. But in this case, as you can see here, my VS Code is already telling me I have to capitalize this here. And it's these sort of small things that React will catch you out on. So, on click here, we want to create a function which will automatically increase the like. So, for this, we are going to come over here, and we want to make something to change this to either true if it's false, or to false if it's true. And to do that, we can go change like, for example, here, and we can go set has liked, right? And we can then go has liked with this exclamation mark out the front. And if you don't know what that means, that just pretty means the opposite of what has liked is already. And if you come over here, you might realize that you get a too many re-renders error. And if you ever get this error while you're coding in React, what it means is that your program has come through and it's reached a point, and in this specific example, it's this point right here, and it's in a re-render loop. Whenever your state changes, your component re-renders. And in this case, the state changes, comes through here, state changes, then it re-renders, and the state changes again. And it ends up in an infinite loop. So, in order to change this, we need to do a callback function. So, in this sense, this is what will fix it. And here we are. So, now that we have this here, we have to find a way for has liked to come through. So, let's just say has liked can equal has liked for the moment. Because, let's do something cool. So, for the moment, let's say if you click the like button, right, you're going to trigger the change like, right? But then, if you trigger the change like button, isn't that going to change the text on the button? If you click on a tweet, if you click on like on a tweet, then obviously there's going to be some sort of data back to you to say, hey, you've already liked this. So, in this case, we're going to get rid of this altogether, and we're going to replace it with a bit of JSX. So, to begin with, create your little JSX brackets here, and we're going to create a little bit of an if statement. An if statement about what to render, depending on the state. So, if you saw here, I just put in has liked into this. So, if I do props.hasLiked, and do the typical JavaScript kind of convention here for if statements, if props has liked, that's going to start off as false, so therefore we should like, else, unlike, right? And here, hopefully, if I come over here, change like is not defined. That's probably because props isn't here. If I come over here, and it starts off as unlike, it should be the other way around, but as you can see here, as you click here, the text changes with it. So we're going to come over here and briefly change this. And we're going to have to do one other thing here. So when we change a like, we're also going to have to add one or remove one to our like count. Now we could do this with another clumsy function, right? Or we could be kind of smart about this. So instead, I'm going to come over to where we defined our likes in our state, right? And I'm actually going to create another if statement. I'm going to go say, so here, has liked, right? So if they have liked, then it's just going to be likes, right? If not, it's going to be likes plus 1, right? And if we come over here, and other way around yet again, so get rid of that, like, and just like that, our likes change. And we can pretty much do the same thing here for favorites. So if I come over here, I can do has favorited, and favorites plus 1, and favorites. Right, and over here, we're going to have to copy this as well because we have the same thing for likes. So now we need the same thing for favorites. So we're going to do has favorited, and the same thing, has favorited again. And yet again, I'm just going to copy this. Change favorite. It was set has favorited. Okay. Alright, and if that should all work out, I can come over here and do the same changes. So on click equals props.change favorite, and then over here I can copy this area here and props.has favorited, unfavorite, and favorite. So if I come over here and click this, we have here a sort of kind of mini tweet system. So that pretty much covers what we wanted to kind of get over in the content side of things. So firstly, let's continue from here. So now that we've passed this point, it's now your turn. So there are a couple of options we're leaving to you guys now. Firstly, you can create one of your own ideas here. So on page 1 here, you can create an online shop that are so items listed with their price, quantity in stock, and maybe even have a cart you can place items into with buttons. You can have a to-do list application. You can complete tasks. You can involve the state there. Add, remove tasks. You could create a blog, right? So like seeing users post, date of posting, like, dislike, kind of similar to Twitter, but if you want something a little bit different, you could go down that path. We have a tic-tac-toe game, so a little bit more on the game side there, but go ahead. Or you could keep on building our little Twitter application, make sure that's a little bit better, if you will. But we want you guys to do it with us now. And if you guys have any questions while you're creating these projects, ask them on the Zoom, because Kenton and I can help you guys out on the Zoom, and we can even create some of these projects while we're here as well, just to help you guys out. So yeah, pretty much that is all for the moment. So yeah, try and create some of these apps. Oop. Oops. Do you want to put people into breakout rooms, perhaps?
There is not a lot of people in Zoom, so
Not a lot of people in
probably
Zoom?
not.
Okay.
There are a few questions in chat, though. What are we here? The question mark. There's someone asking, do you have to use the question mark syntax, so that fancy if statement you showed earlier, or can we use a normal if statement?
Do you want that one?
Yeah, okay. That will be on your code,
yep.
so if you pull that up, we'll go back to that code with the
okay.
if statement
So,
here. Yeah, so what this question mark does is it's kind of like a if statement which you can use inline without having multiple lines like you would in a normal if statement. it works much the same way in that, so if props.hasLike is true, then it will show an unlike. So you can unlike things you've already liked, or if you haven't liked it, it'll show a like button. In this case, we can't actually replace it with an if statement, because if statements will not work inside JSX. They'll only work inside ordinary JavaScript. You can try that if you'd like, as Paul is doing now. It is a bit silly, and it's definitely not going to work.
Oh, hang on, it needs to be outside.
I mean, yeah. So if you wanted to use an ordinary if statement, you can do it, but you'd have to put it outside in your JavaScript code. But we use these question marks because it makes everything a lot more concise, and it keeps the text close to where it's being used. So you can see that it's almost ordinary HTML. It just has a little bit of clever logic in there, and that is definitely not working.
Nope.
It is not liking that.
Definitely not.
Yep. It is a ternary operator. Well spotted. Okay. So, does anyone have a preference for one of these projects which they might like us to go through?
Yep.
I think we have time for that.
Probably mock something up.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a favorite?
Let me see.
What was the list of projects?
Well, we had an online shop, a to-do list application, a blog, and a tic-tac-toe game. I have a feeling the online shop and the to-do list would be pretty handy. The tic-tac-toe game, that sounds...
I want to do the tic-tac-toe
game.
I would do that if I was choosing one to do.
Okay.
That sounds
That's
like
fair.
fun.
That's fair, okay. So should we maybe do the tic-tac-toe game? We can go like halfway through it. Yeah, why not? Okay. Well, seeing that we're here, I'll go and create a new project. So we'll cover this. We'll cover like finishing your React project after the whole do-it-yourself section. But for the moment, so I'm going to do npm create React app, tic-tac-toe. And now I wait. Oh wait, no. Did I stuff something up? No, it's fixed.
Meanwhile, in chat, while we're waiting for create React app to run, RBG Gut asks, how do you save state to cookies or session in React? And yeah, it's a good question because the state, which you use by useState, it gets reset every time you refresh the page. So if you want something a little more permanent, how can we do that? And it turns out we can do that by something very similar. Did you have something to say?
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
Oh, okay. So useState is kind of like a transient state, but if you have a similar thing like useLocalStorage is a similar hook, but it's a custom package, but it works in much the same way. Can you move over to my screen?
Sure thing.
I will need to share my screen.
Yep.
Yep. There we go. Okay. So earlier we saw something like useState, but now we can do this thing like useLocalStorage, which is from a custom npm package called React Use, which is a package full of useful, cool things like all sorts of useful hooks, and useState is an example of a hook. But this useLocalStorage, it works in much the same way. We have the current value, and we can set it, and it also gives you a function to delete the value. And if you do this, it will actually save to your local storage. And that's very cool. And you only really need to change one line of code. You just replace the useState with useLocalStorage. And it is that easy to have local storage in React.
Sweet.
I wonder if I can get that going, actually. I might try and get that working if you're starting the tic-tac-toe game.
Yep, I'll start the tic-tac-toe now. Okay, sweet. npm start. Oh, snap. So this will refresh me and I'll be starting off clean. Where would it be? Here it is. Source app.js. Alrighty. Get rid of that area. Maybe kick things off with a table.
Yeah, so when making React apps, it's always good to, I think, worry about the state last. And you can start with a very basic wireframe sketch of what your HTML should look like with just pure HTML, as Paul is coding up right now.
Yep.
We're making a classic HTML table with all the TRs, TDs that come with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Feel free to tag along or give me suggestions as I go. Oakley dokley. Now.
And we should have now a
Buttons.
table with a 3x3 table.
Yep. Okay. Oops. Okay. So button there, and yikes. Small. Oakley dokley. So get rid of that. Get the state in there. And we can go ahead and have every single button with its own state. So, for the moment, can either be
What are we doing there? What are you thinking about,
see.
Paul?
I'm thinking about each button is going to either have almost two, dare I say, three states. Because the two states are going to be the cross and the circle. But then the third state is when there's nothing at all there whatsoever.
Yeah, so you can't just use a Boolean there, can you?
Yeah, you can't.
I think.
Any suggestions?
Maybe just a string even. A string across X or 0.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be a pretty decent idea.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So let's set this up for one button so far. So const button 1 set button 1 equals use state. For the moment, nothing there. And we can come over here and use a button 1. I come over here, boop, nothing. And if I add a cross in here, cross is added. So, we're going to need a function now to create either a cross or a circle. So, oh, I like what you've done with the tweet system. Let me just share your screen.
Yeah, so I've had a little bit of a play around, and with the buttons, I've just gone and added a little symbol here. So, you know, Twitter uses a heart symbol for likes or a star symbol for favorites, and we've gone and done that. And actually, this is an example of the local storage, which I was talking about earlier. So I just replaced it with useState with useLocalStorage. And you need to give it a key. But this key actually needs to be unique. So we pass liked plus handle. Otherwise, all our tweets are going to be stored to the same spot in local storage. And they'll all be linked together, which is not what we want.
Mm.
So here, we can unlike things. Let me just like everything. We like everything. And if you refresh, you'll see that it stays liked.
Nice.
Very cool. And to convince yourself, you can actually check local storage, and you can see that favorited, it has stored all of it there, along with a bunch of other stuff, which is unrelated.
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
Is that React DevTools in that one?
I do have React DevTools.
Yeah.
But this is just the ordinary browser console in F5. Do you want to show React DevTools?
I haven't
This
actually
button
known how to use it.
Okay, I can give a
Yeah.
quick rundown.
You can give rundown. We've got plenty of time, so.
React DevTools is really just, you may be familiar with this inspect element view in Chrome or your browser of choice. It lets you do things like change the text in Google to say whatever you want it to, and to make it look like you're hacking Google, maybe. So this does a similar thing for React, but instead of the elements, it actually shows our components. And if you click here, for example, this tweet in the middle, you can see that this is a tweet, and these are all the props we passed to it. And it's very cool for just making sure that your components are working the way you expect them to. And I think also it highlights which components re-render and when they re-render, which is really cool to see. For example, if I unlike this button, you can see that it's actually just updating the middle one. So React is a bit clever about that. It won't re-render the entire page if it knows that only this one has changed. So it's quite efficient there. Yeah, that's React DevTools. To install it, you can just Google React DevTools, and it should show up as an extension or plugin for your browser of choice.
I'm sure we can add React DevTools to the description of the live stream when it's over.
Yep.
Yeah, shouldn't be too difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're still dealing with the button 1, tic-tac-toe. So I think then we're going to have to create a state on who's actually giving their turn. Right?
Yeah, so we will need a current player state to keep track of whose turn it is.
So for the moment we can do use state. Let's say it's X's turn first.
Yeah.
And then we can create, let's say they go and click on a button. A couple of things are going to happen. So we're going to be creating probably a function of this. So to create a function, we're going to be doing a const, an arrow function as we call it. So const, let's say pick square, our parameters, and that is how we define functions in JSX. So we have our whole function there. Now we're going to go and say, okay, what button was picked? How do we do that?
What are we thinking? So
button 1 is clicked, so
we have a lot of buttons. How are we going to store the value of each individual cell? How would we need to store that somewhere?
yeah,
I think what we can do there.
we can array even.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
can even use an array as state.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that says state has to be a string or a single
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
You can actually use an array as state. And I think that's what we'll need to do here, because you don't want to be repeating yourself and going use state, buttons 1, button 2, button 3, and so on.
Yeah.
We can be a little clever about that. Okay, so it'll start out.
So
How are we going to do this? It'll start out, probably just make it
probably just like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
can make it a flat array, or you can make it an array of arrays.
Yeah. I reckon just a flat array will do for now.
Yeah, we only have 9 cells, so
Yeah, should be easy enough.
yeah.
So for that we can go This will work, right? I'm not right.
Yeah, this will work.
Okay, so
Yeah, so the default state of our buttons is just going to be an array of 9 empty strings because everyone's empty to start with.
okay, sweet. And here we can go buttons 0. Okay, let's come back to your screen. So come back here and we can change this to X. And sweet, okay. That there is a much better way. So now that we have that sorted, how are we going to pick a square? So when on click happens, obviously the square is picked, right? A parameter is going to have to be given about which index square it is. And for that, we might have to pass off the ID of the button. What do you think?
Yes, you would. So
Yeah.
each button would need to have its own number, for example. So button...
So for this 0 indexed, so...
you don't need to define it that way. You can just
Yeah,
do
sure.
like...
Share screen?
I don't have that code, but I can fudge it.
Yeah, just like it.
Button equals, what am I doing? On click. I spelled button wrong.
I will.
And you can actually do something like,
Screen sharing.
oh, apologies. Buttons on click. So a few things are not going to work here because I don't have the same code. But you can just do, oh, you will need a helper function.
Yeah.
Const pick button. Pick button should take a number, for example I, and it should pick that button. And I'll just buttons. I'll just copy that out to make it work. Use state empty array. Sure. Const pick buttons. What we would do is somehow pick button should set the ith element in buttons to be X or O,
Yeah.
for example. But you have to be careful of that
Why?
because in React,
That. Do we have any? No questions.
No.
Yep.
do you want to check YouTube chat or actually you're streaming?
Yeah, I'm streaming, so.
And I'm screen sharing, but that's fine.
All good. Well.
No.
let's
So when you go set buttons, you have to be careful that you're not mutating the objects. For example, if I go like buttons 0 equals X, that actually won't work. In the same way that you can't modify buttons variable, you can't modify it at all in this way. So what we need to do is set buttons to a new buttons array. Let's just make a new buttons equals ... buttons. This ... syntax is a fancy JavaScript syntax, which essentially means we'll make a copy of buttons. So new buttons is now a new array, separate from buttons. And when we can go new buttons, I equals, we'll say X for now. And then you can set that to new buttons. And hopefully this should work. I think.
We hope.
This is buttons 0. Of course, I is not going to work there. Failed to compile. I'll just comment out this and replace all of the buttons with this one button here. At the moment it's empty, but if we click them, an X will appear. That is almost like magic.
Yeah, almost like it.
That's a little complicated. State can get complicated when you're using data structures as part of your state.
Yep.
But how do we want to do this? And you can see here, actually, in the React Dev Tools, I don't think I can zoom in on that, unfortunately. But there is a state, and it's an array of x at 0, because that's the index we passed in.
Yep.
Yeah. So, where do we want to go from here? Do you want to actually copy this to your one, and then you should be able to make it work for multiple buttons?
Let me just request remote control.
Yep. Are you able to copy paste like that? Actually, I will just paste it in chat. And we can do that. Actually, we have a message in chat. No, we don't. There you go.
Okay, sweet.
Oh, so just go out of that Zoom and go into your own screen. Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, I'll take this. Olivia and Kenton.
Mm-hmm. You already have the use state, so you can get rid of
There we go. Okay, sweet. So we have that, and then we have two return statements. Oh no. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And if you make your buttons look like this, that should be fine.
Yeah.
So on click, we pick that button.
Pretty much. So get rid of the ID there.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Big square is not defined. Oh, that's because we managed to get different functions.
That would do it.
That would definitely do it.
Too many
re-renders.
Too many re-renders. That thing we were talking about earlier. So it's very easy to forget and accidentally cause an infinite render loop.
That there is how you fix it. The two brackets and your arrow function. That will definitely fix it. So, or not. Oh, is that not saved? There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, come over here, click that. Great. So, now, this is currently always setting to X, so we want to change that to be kind of changing between X and 0 depending on the turn. So, for the moment, we can go set turn.
How about another ternary statement?
Yeah, definitely a ternary. So, if turn is equal to X, we're going to have to turn this to O, and else turn it to X. I can just put that at the very end.
Yep.
And then over here we can just make this turn.
Yep.
Okay, and then if I come back over here, X, there we go.
Oh yeah.
Sweet. So, that there is the start of what could be tic-tac-toe. How's everyone else going with the other projects? Anyone willing to share, perhaps? Maybe asking a bit much, especially on the first workshop day.
Yeah, potentially. I think this would go.
How's the live stream chat going?
Suggestion to use WebStorm.
WebStorm. Yeah, David.
WebStorm is like IntelliJ for web development.
No, VS Code all the way.
No, yeah, I like VS Code. VS Code
Same.
is quick and does what we need to do.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, well, right now.
How about we can continue this a little further and maybe make a few more buttons work by
so I'll
just copying that down. Actually, would it make sense to put that inside a component, do you think? Have a tic-tac-toe button component.
a tic-tac-toe buttons component.
No, just a single button.
Oh, okay. I kind of see where you're coming from. So, yeah, so that means the button itself would be a component, and we could just pass it through this.
Yeah, because I mean, what we're about to do now is a whole bunch of copy pasting.
That seems fair. All right, I'll create a button .js. Seems like I'm making a lot of buttons this workshop.
Buttons are everywhere.
Yep.
Surprise, surprise.
Import React from React function button. Return div. This is just me speeding through all the necessary stuff here. Okay, and then we can just go.
So we'll just copy our button HTML.
Actually, we don't even need the div because it's
no, it can just be a button.
Yeah, it can just be a button because all the return takes, or all the return requires is one tag, and the button is pretty much one tag. So, that's that.
Which of those should become props?
Well, because we're going to need to pass through the array, I think.
Yeah, I think you just so have pick square and buttons be a prop, or be both props, as well as the ID of the button.
Yeah. Okay. So props coming through here.
Yep.
And we can have. So let's just go and do the first import over here. So import button from button.js, and we can come down here and do button, and then we want to go and put our props in. So in this case we want to pass through our array, so our buttons array. It's going to name it the same for simplicity's sake. Buttons. And we want to pass through our function, so pick square equals pick square.
Yep.
Pretty much. And do we need anything else? Don't think so.
I think you'd want it to know the ID of the button, so what number it is.
That's right. Yeah. So have the ID, and in this case the ID for this one would be 1. And this one over here would be, let me just copy that properly, TD over here, and the ID for this one would be 0. So coming back over here to our button.js.
Good stuff. And now we need to actually use our props inside our button component.
Buttons.
So we'll just replace
ID.
it like that.
Don't need this because that's being.
You might still need that. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah, you do still need that.
I will replace that then.
Yep.
Props.id. And that should be there.
That looks good.
Looks good. Let's test it out and hope for the best. That still works.
And now we have 2 buttons.
That works. Wow. 2 buttons.
2 buttons for the price of 1.5.
Yeah, that would have been a whole lot more complicated to do if we had one for components.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The plain JavaScript would have been a lot.
Yeah, it would have been. So we can just go and change that. Honestly, just be easier to do. Now just follow the changes.
Oh yeah.
Now we're just getting lazy. So 3, 4, 5, and over here.
And then we'll have what?
6. Whoops, that's not
6,
6.
7, 8.
6.
At the bottom there.
8. Yep. And now if we come over here, refresh that.
Boom. Would you look at that?
Don't suppose you'd be keen for a game, Kenton?
I mean, sure.
Sure. What do you want to be? Cross or circle?
I'll be circle.
So I'll go first then. I'll go
Good
cross.
fun. So yeah, with a little bit of work, we've had a very basic tic-tac-toe game. Obviously, there's nothing like you can't win yet, and you also can't. But you can do silly things like click on your other people's
Oh, so it's like the UQCS specialty
Oh,
tic-tac-toe.
Yeah. So it's a little bit broken,
okay.
but the basic game is there. And you
Really
can play
is.
with that. Oh, you're going to do that to me. You're
I
gonna
will,
do
I will,
that.
yep.
Well, I guess I have to block there. You didn't
missed
see
it
that one
completely.
coming.
Yep.
And I believe I win the game there, actually.
You really have, yep. So now I guess another good challenge from this point forth is for you guys to design an end game for this. So pretty much to test the winning conditions for this, so horizontally, vertically, diagonally, and to see if you can figure out the winner, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and somewhere along the way you may want to fix the bug where you can pull a pro gamer move and place pieces over your enemy.
Or maybe that's going to be a feature of your new game, because as we all know, a typical tic-tac-toe loss is one where there's no more spaces to go anymore.
Oh yeah, it's a tie a lot of the time. How boring.
Yeah, how boring. Our mistake might have just invented a whole new awesome variation of this game. All with React.
Who knows?
Wow. Okay. Any questions from the live stream?
No.
Nope, nothing yet. Oakley dokley.
What do we want to do?
Well,
I think you can make it. How can we? Actually, let's just make a very small change. At the moment, our buttons are very tiny when they're empty, but that's because there's actually no text there. So I think we can make a change to our buttons component, which will add just a space. If it's blank, it'll add a space, so it'll show up as a square instead of as a tiny squished tile, which it is now.
Oakley dokley.
So to do that, how can we do that?
So, you can probably say if this here is blank, have it as a space. What do you think?
Yeah. If you want to do some JavaScript, cool JavaScript stuff,
Should
you
I?
can just do something
You know,
like.
I'm sharing your screen again.
That's fine. You can just do something like this, and if props.button 0 is empty, then it'll change it to a space.
Okay, sweet. So, copying Kenton's great idea just then. So, if that there is...
So that there is your OR in JavaScript. So if props.button is empty string, which makes it falsy, we'll replace it with a space.
Sweet, let's go look at this. Refresh.
No, that did not.
Oh no.
Why did that not work? Maybe we need a non-breaking space. Actually, just try putting a dot there
A dot?
and see if that works.
Probably will.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
There's still a little bit of weirdness going on with the column width, but
Yeah, there is.
that's okay.
That has to do with the character width and all that.
Certainly
yeah.
not a polished game, but
No, especially not the one we just designed in 20 minutes or so.
no, but I think that was not a lot of work.
Yeah, that was pretty easy, and I think it would have been a little bit more difficult if you weren't using React, that's for sure.
I think the only tricky thing there is the array, which you had to work with.
Yeah, definitely, and that array is definitely a new thing. Like, we didn't cover that in our Twitter project, but the array is definitely really useful, especially if you want to go into sort of like an object-oriented sort of area. You can use this to store other objects as well. So, for example, here you might have name, something,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then other stuff here. So you can include all these other sort of stuff in your array state variables and have them really useful.
Yeah, just as throwing back to the Twitter example, you could even have like your container, which has multiple tweets, And your container has its own array of tweets, for example.
Yeah,
And that is definitely something you can do.
definitely is.
And with a little bit of work, you can hook that into APIs, it can fetch tweets. You can actually hook it into the Twitter API, if you were so inclined.
Yeah. We've only scratched the surface in this workshop here, so if you're really keen about React after this, then obviously one, we've done our jobs, and two, you can go ahead and like learn about so much more React. There's really so much more. But what other projects do we have here? We've got a blog and to-do list and an online shop. What do you think, Kenton? Do you feel like tackling any one of these ideas?
I don't know, I quite like the little game we've made at the moment.
Yeah.
We could continue fixing a few bugs.
Do you think there's anything we could add to this tic-tac-toe game which could make it really cool?
I think I'm going to be really boring and say we should fix the bug where you can click on other people's squares. Because I know you were really let down by that loss there.
Possibly. Okay. So,
yeah, where would we put that? Where would we do that?
well, I think we might put that in... Probably maybe... Dare I say around here?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So maybe before we go ahead and set it new buttons I equals turn, you probably want to check if new buttons I already has a player.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that would do it.
So let's go and check. So if new buttons I
I think
is...
you can just use ordinary JavaScript if statements there.
Oh, okay. It's like, so if it's equal to x, or is, so coming over here, I is equal to O, then we don't want to do anything.
Actually, that should just be an ordinary if statement because it's not inside HTML
as
code.
in ordinary if statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's just inside,
Yeah.
and we don't need the braces there either.
Okay, sweet.
So we can in fact just write normal JavaScript,
Sweet.
and so if new buttons I is X or O, then what do we do instead? Probably just do nothing, I think.
Yeah, honestly. So do that. Or honestly, it'd be only in the else statement that it would really count. But that makes me kind of want to think, hey, we should change this so it's not equal to. I think that'd have a better effect because we're only doing testing one condition at that point.
That makes sense. I think you'd also need to change it to an and as well in the middle.
That's a can do. Sweet, so we got that there. Now if we come
Seems
over
reasonable, yep.
Here. Okay.
And we'll
X.
click players. Oh,
Yeah.
oh no. There goes that winning strategy.
Oh no. Yeah. Well, now we have a really proper functioning game, classic version of tic-tac-toe.
Classic version.
Yep. So, I think that sums up tic-tac-toe pretty well. So, do we want to tackle another project, or are people pretty good?
Yeah, I
Pretty
think we can wrap up there. And now we'll just go through quickly
Yeah, okay.
how you can publish your brand new React app or your brand new tic-tac-toe game, and how you can put this online for other people to see. Yep. So when it's time to export your app, all you need to do is save your application, press Ctrl+C to stop the dev server you're running, and then go back to that console. You type in npm run build, and what this will do is it will compress your JavaScript. It will run it through Babel, which Paul mentioned way back at the beginning, which converts all that fancy HTML into JavaScript code, which can be run on any browser. And this may take a few seconds or minutes, depending on how complex your code is, or if you've used any large packages.
I'll even do it right now.
Yep, so we can run that. Is that on the tic-tac-toe game?
Yeah, this is the tic-tac-toe game. So npm run build.
Hit enter there, and it will take some time. But once this process is completed, it'll put a new folder in your React directory called build, and that folder is actually ready to go. So that is your entire React app. And then you can put it, is that done?
That looks done to me.
Yeah,
so
I think
I'll come over here to the tic-tac-toe, and here's my build folder.
There is the build
I haven't
folder.
built my workshop yet, as you can see, so that's why this one's here.
Build, and there's some HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and other image files in there, which is basically ready to go. You can upload it to a web server like GitHub Pages, or your own personal site, and it will be available there. And the great thing about React is you don't need to run a server. You don't need to run any database for your app. It's all on the client side.
Yep, brilliant. All right, so thanks guys for coming to the UQCS React workshop. Make sure to watch this space over the next semester. We've got a couple more things planned out. Yeah, thanks guys for coming.
And we hope you were able to follow along and maybe make a little React app of your own.